But when does the problem comes? The problem comes, okay, this year's, I've just mentioned, it's kind of observability is just a report of your system that helps the application developers to detect the issues at early stages. But when does the problem comes? I mean, if we already have observability to help us detect the issues, then why we are still looking into this topic? The problem is the logs, the the matrix and the tracing, they all work independently. I mean, in separate, isolated fashion. What I mean is, let's take example that traditionally, if I have an issue, what I'll do is I'll look at the matrix first. Like I'll look at the chart, like what is going wrong. I can see something red. Why is it showing red? And later on, when I see red, so I'll try to dig in my logs. Now, these logs helps me in finding the correlation, what might went have wrong, make some guess, and obviously then further take some peek into the configuration files. And this becomes a really messy process. Imagine that you have a problem and you have to look at 3 different places. And at each place, you are not very sure what might be the problem. So an application developer ends up spending a lot of time, scratching his head, thinking what might have went wrong. And overall, it's a very time-consuming and tiring process. So what's exactly missing? If observability is such a good solution and it gives us 3 pillars, then what is exactly missing? It's missing, what the missing element is all these 3 works in isolation, like I said. And the better solution is to have them work in a unified fashion. Now, how do we have that? So let's redefine observability. If we have these 3 workings together, then how will the picture look? We'll see that. And that's why we are introducing OpenTelemetry. So what is exactly OpenTelemetry? So OpenTelemetry is actually the modern day observability. It actually is an open source product, which is the great thing. So anybody can contribute it and anybody can start using it, exploring it. Second is it is vendor neutral. Vendor neutral as in you don't have to tie up it with a specific monitoring tool and only with that it will work. No. Any application can start using OpenTelemetry anytime. And what it does is it gives the solution in unified fashion. So how does it do is it brings together the traces, the metrics and the logs on a single unified platform in a single unified pattern. So how does it actually works? So the fundamental aspect of observability is actually an event. Whenever, let's take an example, whenever there is any API request, that API request, you can think it as an event. And every event has a timestamp and it has a collection of attributes. These attributes actually helps in understanding what can be the reason of the issues. They helps in digging further to be true. Now what OpenTelemetry does is, it takes the simple event and it adds 4 more special attributes to it. These are nothing but trace ID, span ID, parent span ID, and operation name. Now what are these exactly? So I'll give you an example. Imagine the user clicks on an action, like it triggers an event, and the event can be as simple as fetching data from the database. So when it fetches the data from the database, it goes through these many layers. So these all are called as our services or, kind of steps in order to get data from the database. Now what OpenTelemetry does is it actually generates, like I said, it generates the trace ID. So a single user action actually acts as a trace. And this trace further has what you call as, I'll just go over here, spans, further spans. So again, I'll navigate to this slide. You can see API gateway, service A, service B. These all are small spans. Now, because of OpenTelemetry, what is happening is we are getting these, very to the point pictures. And how it is able to do? It is able to do it because to these events, it have added these extra attributes. What are they? They trace ID, span ID, parent span ID, and operation. So what is exactly trace ID? It is the overall ID given to a single action. Span ID, on the other hand, is the further small steps happening inside that trace. Parent ID helps in understanding what happened first, what happened next. So it is actually linking the spans together. And the next is the operation name. So any event has one operation name, and that's how it tracks. So this is just, I've mentioned that whenever a user faces any issue, for example, let's say the response time is very low, or I'm getting the response very late from my application. So what OpenTelemetry does is it identifies the trace ID. What is the trace? Then it examines the small spans. It gives you where the problem actually lies. And further, it even helps in matrix, like it creates a chart for you. So that is the main idea behind OpenTelemetry. Now, let me show you this quickly in an action, and this will give you the overall flow to understand like how OpenTelemetry is exactly working. So in order to show you this application, I have, I've just used Docker Compose, and I've spun 4 containers. These containers are actually my application containers. This application has a front end, it has a back end, and for observability, in order to implement OpenTelemetry observations, I've used Jaeger and Prometheus. So let me show you this practically. Let's see it, take example of this application. Let me just spin this application first quickly. So this is the application that I've just spinned, and if I check this application of mine, it has currently 4 containers spinned. My first container is actually, these two are, this one is my observability, OpenTelemetry logs monitoring containers. And this one is my actual application, the Java application. I've used Spring Boot for that. And one is my React application, that is my front-end application. Now, what my application does is, let me just navigate to my front-end application. So this is a simple weather application that I have developed, and it's the front end of this application. What this application does is, if I just enter any city name, like let's say example of Pune, I enter Pune, it gives me the current temperature. What is the current temperature of the city going on? If I enter Delhi, I get the current temperature in Delhi. So what I have done is, in the background, I'm using an open API, open weather API to get this data in real time. Now all things looks good. Sorry. Now let me just move ahead and even show you my Jaeger and Prometheus. So since I have triggered 2 actions over here, that is, I have triggered 2 API calls, I want to monitor them. So for monitoring, my Java application, this container, which is actually hosting my backend, have configured OpenTelemetry, and this is the code for that. Here, if you see in my pom.xml, I've included OpenTelemetry everywhere. I mean, just for those traces, metrics, and all the stuff that I discussed a few minutes back. So if you add these libraries to any of your existing application, be it Spring Boot application, be it any Python application, Node.js application that you want to add monitoring, you have to use its specific library. You can see I've added OpenTelemetry API, OpenTelemetry SDK, OpenTelemetry Exporter OTLP. OTLP is nothing but the OpenTelemetry protocol. Also, I've added Prometheus library so that I can view these logs properly. So now let me just navigate to my actual application, which is my monitoring application, which is hosted on port 9090. So this is actually my Prometheus, and whatever actions I'm doing, it is actually going to collect the logs or my matrix over here. So if I just check over here, let me just show you the matrix. I want to check all the HTTP requests with the maximum time that they have taken. So I'm selecting this one, and I'm just showing you the graph. So this is how it shows me that I have been getting the request, and it's displaying the graph. This graph is actually talking about the response time taken. So how long it took and so on. So since it's like very milliseconds and all, we don't see much difference, because if you see the timing over here, it's 0.55 milliseconds, very small. Now let me show you even the traces that I was talking about. So here's my traces. I can see this is my weather application. I just click on find traces, and this is how I can see that I have got all the traces here. Let me just show you one of the trace. Like, let me do something dynamic now. Let me add one more city here, Mumbai. And I add Mumbai here, and I just click on find traces again, and see just now that is at 10:52. Let me just do it again, find traces. The latest timestamp, it should show, 10:52. So it is actually doing everything in real time. So everything looks good here. But let's say if I an application issue coming up. For example, I have tried to involve a delete button here. If I click on delete button for any of these requests, let me click this Mumbai part. So you see nothing is happening. We feel nothing is happening, but actually it's going to delete. But the problem that I'm hitting is it is going to take very long to delete. And that's what I want to see, that whether my eager as well as Prometheus is showing anything about the time delay. So I have actually intentionally added a 20-second of delay. So after 20 seconds, you can see it's gone. So this was a pretty long time for any request to be served. So what do? I go to my Prometheus and I again just, execute this and see. So if you see now, comparatively, the other requests have just gone down. Their graphs have gone down. And this green part, if you see, it's actually the delete action, and it actually took how much? 20 milliseconds. So OpenTelemetry is now comparing and saying me, Prometheus is now taking the data from OpenTelemetry and showing me that what action is taking more time. And if I go to my Jaeger, you will see again if I click on find traces, and let me show you the delete one. Yeah, here's the delete one. And it actually took, compared to others were like 1.78 milliseconds and so small. And if I talk about this one, it took 20 milliseconds. Now let's take a look at the traces. So I talked about traces, right? The traces are like showing the traces has some spans. So these are the spans. So in order to complete this request, it actually executed these many calls. And the total time span it took was 20 seconds. And we can see who took 20 seconds this long is actually this one, this thing. So now I can go ahead and check into my application that who is this and why is it taking this long. So if I just go over here in my code, you can see I've actually introduced, this is my delete code. And I've actually introduced a thread.sleep. That was an intentional thing to show. But that's how OpenTelemetry is helping me to get to my issues even more faster. So this is all about OpenTelemetry that I have to talk, guys. Any questions? Yeah, I'm done. I'm just open for any question answers. Okay. Okay. So thank you for attending, and I have shared this code in this GitHub repository. So in case if you want to further explore this topic, you can always find this use case over here. Okay. Thank you.